This video is brought to you by MUBI, a curated streaming service showing exceptional films from around the globe. Get a whole month free at mubi.com/yarazaid. We're gonna start, but before we do, I got some spoiler warnings for you. The following video includes spoilers for A Nightmare on Elm Street, The Dream Master, Tusk, Black Swan, Teeth, kind of, and I don't directly spoil these, but there will be clips that I use from these films that could potentially fall into the spoiler category, so the stuff, the thing, obviously. Junji Ito works, including Slug Girl, The Brood, From Beyond, Videodrome, Slither, and whatever. Also, before going into this, you should know that I barely talk about the stuff. My biggest criticism of the stuff has always been that I just wish it had more body horror. The reason I put this image in the thumbnail, though, is because the poster for the stuff is more memorable and more terrifying than the movie itself, and it's my favorite example of body horror. This poster has more body horror than all 90 minutes of the movie, unfortunately. Remakes suck generally, but a remake of the stuff with more body horror? I don't know that I would fight that. Anyway, cue the nightmare. Body horror is one of the most misunderstood subgenres of horror films. These movies get written off as disgusting, vile, and grotesque trash, mostly because they are often disgusting, vile, and grotesque, but they are not trash. Not always. For the other ones, all the things that people hate most about them are all the things that make them beautiful. Because within these disgusting visuals, there is a genuine sentiment of truth and of beauty that feels very cathartic. Horror can be a strangely peaceful thing. Between the storms of terror, the agonizing violence, and the creeping unease, horror retains a sense of serenity and comfort that, on the surface, seems rather conflicting. But once you consider the emotional toll that horror can put its viewers through, our tendency to relate it to tranquility makes perfect sense. Through these movies, be them slashers or ghost stories, we get to work through our fears and anxieties in a safe environment where we never feel threatened. We get to be hopeless, and we get to be extravagant in our gore, and we get to revel in the grotesque without having to actually subject ourselves to any of those things. So by the end of the movie, we've gone through a wave of different emotions. Sometimes we laugh, sometimes we cry, especially if we're watching Lake Mungo or Dark Water, which I still feel pretty traumatized by. And for 2 hours, give or take, our relationship with fear is tantamount to our enjoyment of the film. We allow ourselves to be afraid so that we can get a taste of freedom, a taste of what it's like to not be held prisoner by our fears. Watching Under the Shadow is not the same as conquering your fear of heights, for example, but it gives you, for a moment, a similar peace of mind when it's all said and done. In particular, body horror, a subgenre that explores every type of gross transformation of the human body, offers us a chance to look at every aspect of our physical existence and our capabilities. It brings an awareness to our bodies that I can't say any other genre does. When you're watching Cronenberg and you see the unnatural stretching of limbs, the crunching of bones, the transformation from man to fly, you become aware of every inch of your skin. You think about your muscles, your bones. Suddenly you feel very present in your own body. And this presence, this awareness of what it feels like to be you, is not unlike the entire purpose of meditation. If you've ever meditated before, you know it's important to pay attention to your breathing, to how your body feels, to what it's saying to you through slight aches or pains, and to listen to it. And guys, body horror is just like meditating. Welcome to my TED Talk. It's a fascination with the human body, but it's also a willingness to look at what's there without flinching and to say, this is what we're made of, as disgusting as it might seem at times, because I'm really saying that the inside of the human body must have a completely different aesthetic. I could conceive of a beauty contest where people would unzip themselves and show you the best spleen or the best looking viscera. I sometimes think of body horror in terms of the 3 R's. These are ruin, release, and rebirth. Depending on the kind of body horror story you're being told, its themes could encompass all 3 R's, sometimes just 1 or 2. And these 3 R's are very fluid. The first R, ruin, doesn't always have to mean destruction. Sometimes the body can stay fully intact. Sometimes it can be the same as it always has been, with the only major difference being knowledge. For instance, teeth. Yes, Here I am, still talking about teeth. Lord, free me from these shackles. There's no great transformation for Dawn, no moment of her body becoming physically unrecognizable. The horror she feels is from realization, not ruin. Her body has always been capable of doing this. She has always had this inside of her, but for years, she's had no idea. For Dawn, the ruin is not about skin ripping into pieces or horns growing from her spine. The ruin is the unearthing of knowledge about her body. Take An American Werewolf in London. The transformation from David's human form to his werewolf form is peak cinema for a reason. While this transformation is painful, it doesn't require his human form to be completely destroyed. He can exist between two worlds, between two bodies. In other cases, however, the destruction of the body is imperative to the transformation of the body. Like the phoenix rising from its ashes, the destruction of the body is necessary for something stronger to be created in its place. In David Cronenberg's 1986 film, The Fly, the second film adaptation of the Georges Langeland short story, I don't know if I said that name right. Seth Brundle, upon realizing his transformation is not going to be stopped by any means, says this.
Saying I'm an insect who dreamt he was a man and loved it. But now the dream is over and the insect is awake.
For Seth, there is no duality to his existence. As one part of him develops and grows in strength, the other part grows weaker until it's destroyed completely. The same can be said for other films like The Divisive Tusk, where Justin Long's character Wallace is kidnapped by a mad, mammal-obsessed scientist and has his body cut into and reshaped to become a walrus. By the end of the film, Wallace still exists, but he will forever be a human, man-made walrus. Something like Darren Aronofsky's Darling Black Swan is all about the battle between these two opposing sides. The Black Swan overtaking the White Swan, the ballerina Nina checkmating the human Nina. For one of them to thrive and to be perfect, the other has to sacrifice itself. It's the imagery that offers that perspective in a unique way. It's the abstract, not the concrete, that creates the catharsis. Because even when the outcome in the film universe is bad, even with all the gore and all the grossness of it, there's something that feels beautiful or even promising about the prospect of such a drastic change. Even in destruction, there is some beauty to be found. In many instances, the thing being ruined is not the body itself, but the perception of the body or the perception of who we are. Dawn perceives herself as being a normal girl, and for all intents and purposes, she is. But her discovery of an abnormality within shatters this perception. It's this that gets ruined and undergoes the transformation. She goes from thinking of herself as a normal person to thinking of herself as a monster to embracing the unique weapon that she has. The process is internal, all emotion, all thought, which is how and why body horror can be so spiritual. I start with Dawn because she's a great example of body horror and the 3 R's. Ruin as the discovery of her extra set of teeth. Release as Dawn letting go of who she thought she was, forgetting labels and a synthesized idea of perfection. And rebirth as Dawn fully embracing her body as is and even being proud of it. I think one of the things human beings fear is change. We all know that those of us who don't die young are going to age, but it's not until we're in the midst of it, of aging, that the gravity of these changes our bodies go through really sinks in. And as Cronenberg put it, it can be scary. You're living in this body that's the same as the one you've always had, but with vastly different capabilities. You have to learn new limits, take on new weaknesses and new strengths, adjust to the change without losing your sense of self. So body horror, with its focus on human transformations, has always felt the most intimate and the most terrifying of subgenres. Other horror movies focus on an external threat, a shape in a jumpsuit, wielding a very clean butcher knife, a new house home to demons and ghosts who want to take your soul, a virus wiping out humanity as we know it, and introducing hordes of new creatures to fear. But with body horror, the change is coming from within, and it's the most terrifying because it is a change we cannot escape. In Junji Ito's Slug Girl, a high school student, Rei, recounts the story of her once best friend, Yoko. Once talkative and bubbly, Rei notices that Yoko starts to talk less, and on the rare occasion that she does speak, her words are unclear and she's hard to understand. It sounds like her tongue is swollen. Eventually, Yuko stops coming to school altogether. together. On one of Rei's visits to Yuko's house, she discovers what's been keeping Yuko from speaking. Her tongue has transformed into the body of a slug. She tries to cut it off, but it always grows back. Her parents try to make her eat salt, but that doesn't do anything. Then they throw her in a bathtub full of salt, hoping it'll shrink the slug, but instead it shrinks the girl's body, leaving just her head, which becomes a shell for the snail. It trails along in the family garden with all the other snails who were once so deeply feared by Yuko. Slug Girl and Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, share this theme that deals with the terror of turning into the thing that you fear most. For Yuko and Slug Girl, it's the snails in her family's garden. For Debbie in Nightmare on Elm Street, it's cockroaches. And I have to say, in the grand scope of the Elm Street franchise, when I consider every scare in every film of the series, Debbie's transformation into a cockroach scares the shit out of me. I too fear cockroaches. Sometimes when I see one, I can't even kill it because I can't fucking move. Could you imagine any part of a cockroach starting to grow from beneath your skin? Ugh! But even with the terrifying nature of these plot points, you're still looking at the element of rebirth. Whether it's for better or worse, these characters are forced to exist in a new way, in a way that they once feared, ostracized by their communities and ever questioning how or if they can continue to live in this way. Sometimes they can live, like in the much fuckery-fueled Tusk. There's no reversing his grotesque transformation into a human walrus, but it is possible for him to continue living as a walrus, and even to find strength in this new form. Enough strength even to kill his captor. I told you there were spoilers. In the context of these films, the transformation is rarely ever a good thing. This rebirth is the source of the horror. But as a viewer, there's a dual response and experience happening, especially for those who can empathize with the ordeal of not recognizing oneself or feeling unease in one's own body. There's this wonderful essay by Nadine Smith on M. Night Shyamalan's Old, and how the film helped her to process her own gender dysphoria. When the body horror doesn't include destruction in tandem with transformation, the transformation and its qualities can serve as a mirror, reflecting the experiences and the relationship trans people have with their bodies. In Old, bones shatter and re-heal in record time, only to break again. Tumors grow at a massive rate, and infections eat the human body in fast motion. By condensing all the physical changes we undergo over the course of a lifetime into a few hours, Shyamalan shows how disturbing it is to feel your body becoming foreign to you. Old is ultimately a film about an accelerated loss of autonomy, one that mirrors, however unintentionally, the experience many trans people have with their bodies. This concern with the flesh and bone of our existence as human beings calls attention to the way we live in and tend to our bodies. It's easy to dismiss the subgenre as torture porn or grotesque or whatever the opposite of elevated is. But for generations upon generations, it's a genre that has helped all kinds of people feel seen or understood when they couldn't find that anywhere else. For more about how body horror can reflect the trans experience, I recommend Nadine Smith's essay along with Cressa Beer's Body Horror and Growing Up Trans, both linked down below. Please read them. For the love of all that is holy, please read them. It's like a diamond that has many facets. You're looking into the same interior, but from different facets of the diamond, and you're saying, what if we stopped fighting this? What if, in fact, what's happening is a good thing? I saved this R for last, even though, in most movies, it usually happens before the spiritual rebirth of the character undergoing the physical transformation. I saved it because it's the most complicated. The release can either refer to the character refusing to fight these changes, choosing to embrace themselves, as was the case with Dawn of Teeth and Nina of Black Swan. Sure, Nina's transformation is mostly imagined, but the moment she accepts it and stops fighting it, she gives the performance of a lifetime, which is what she'd always wanted. It's not until she truly believes that she has become a swan that she can embody the swan. Or in the case of Wallace the Walrus, it's not entirely an acceptance of the way things are, but a realization that he's still capable of killing his captor. In other instances, the release is simply the moment that the transformation is complete. Debbie going full cockroach, Yuko going full snail, the Thing going full the Thing. On screen, it's the end of a fight, the succumbing the white flag. For an audience, though, it can become a representation of experiencing the worst thing possible and still coming out of it all right. Different, maybe, but still alive, still kicking. There's a moment in Tusk, long before Wallace encounters the mad scientist, where he and his girlfriend are lying in bed. She mentions how he never cries, and it concerns her because crying means you're human. Crying means you feel things. He kind of brushes her off about it, but at the end of the movie, when he's adjusted to living his life as a man-made walrus, he looks up at his girlfriend, remembers what was, and bursts into tears. And if I'm being honest, this is usually my response to body horror. Like, mostly I'm grinning and going, ooh, ah. But sometimes after the dust has settled, I feel like crying because I feel like I have a new perspective on things, on my life, on appreciating it. Body horror offers us a chance at self-reflection in a very sneaky way. Whether we're thinking about aging, body dysphoria, pregnancy, disability, menstruation, whatever, it encompasses all the big horror about living in a body with an expiration date, because that horror is internal. It's extremely personal and extremely adept at getting under our skin. I'll end with this quote from Caitlin Starling. Body horror is, in some ways, the easy option. It hurts. It disgusts by definition. We all have bodies, and the entry fee of being embodied is the certainty, not the risk, the certainty that eventually something will go wrong with it. We will lose control of it. We will suffer indignities large and small. We will, at some point, at multiple points, have to redefine what it is to be ourselves as our bodies change in ways we can't predict. And even when everything is working normally, there are still little horrors that we've all learned to welcome. Pregnancies, painful growth spurts, aging. That familiarity is what makes body horror such a visceral, overwhelming, powerful tool in storytelling. It gets a knee-jerk, gut-level reaction. It can flinch open barriers between author and reader. It can be transcended in its extremely physical reality. To accompany a character through their suffering is to get to know them intimately. MUBI is a curated streaming service, a place to watch beautiful, interesting, incredible cinema. Every day, MUBI premieres a new film. From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there is always something new to discover. With MUBI, each and every film is hand-selected. It's like your own personal film festival, streaming anytime and anywhere. Since we're on the topic of catharsis, I'd like to recommend the movie House of Hummingbird. I'm a sucker for coming-of-age stories because they never cease to have an emotional effect on me, and Kim Bora's directorial debut, House of Hummingbird, is no exception. If you enjoy stories that get right into the heart of growing up, of the world changing around you as you try to keep up with yourself and everyone else, then this is the kind of story that would speak to you. It's about 14-year-old Eunhee, who clings to warmth while trying to survive in a world that is cruel and cold. I don't want to give too much away because it's one of those films that is most enjoyable when you least expect it. There's adventure, young love, and above all, similar glimmers of hope as what I talked about earlier in the video. If you think you'd enjoy this, you can try MUBI free for 30 days at mubi.com/Yarazaid. That is mubi.com/Yarazaid for a whole month of great cinema for free.